The grand ballroom of the Westbrook Hotel shimmered with wealth and influence. Light poured through crystal chandeliers, casting warm reflections on polished marble floors. Rows of white linen tables, each adorned with golden nameplates and glossy portfolios, filled the space. This was the investors' summit. The kind of place where the world's future was decided quietly over dessert and champagne. The air was heavy with expensive cologne and whispered ambition. Conversations buzzed in dozens of languages, laughter rose in polite intervals, and names were dropped like confetti. On stage, a massive banner read, "Welcome to the future of global investment." At the entrance, a man stepped through the security checkpoint. No entourage, no cameras, no designer brand flashed across his chest. Just a charcoal suit, a simple black coat, and a silver watch that quietly said, "I belong here." "Name?" asked the security guard, scanning his tablet. "Darius Langston," the man said, calm and clear. The guard's posture shifted immediately. "Mr. Langston, I apologize, sir. Please, go right in." He stepped aside quickly, his voice softer now. Darius nodded. "It's fine, I prefer it that way." He moved into the crowd unnoticed, just how he liked it. No one turned. No one whispered. Few recognized the man whose global investments had quietly shaped 5 continents. He wasn't in tabloids. He wasn't on red carpets. But his money flowed through the veins of markets that controlled governments. Across the room, Griffin Stroud stood like a statue of wealth. Silver-haired, broad-shouldered, suit tailored to perfection. He laughed with a crowd of loyalists hanging onto his every word. Griffin Stroud didn't whisper. He commanded. He didn't walk. He owned space. At the far side of the room, near the stage, Naomi Clark spotted Darius. She left her conversation mid-sentence, exhaled with relief, and walked over briskly. "You made it," she said, offering her hand. "I said I would," Darius replied. His handshake was brief but firm. "Everything's in place for the announcement?" "Yes," she said, then hesitated. Griffin changed the script again this morning. Darius noticed a flicker in her eyes. Worry, disgust, maybe both. Just be ready for one of his usual performances. The lights dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd. A spotlight snapped onto the stage. Griffin Stroud strode to the podium, his presence soaking up the silence like a sponge. He paused, the pause of a man who knew every eye was on him, and then smiled. "Welcome to the future," he began, his voice warm, rehearsed, and perfect. "At Stroud Dynamics, we don't follow the market. We create the market. We don't adapt to change. We define it." Buzzwords flowed like honey. Innovation, transformation, disruption, sustainability, diversity. Every time he said diversity, Naomi's jaw clenched ever so slightly. Then came the moment. "And now," Griffin said, lowering his voice to a faux confidential tone, "we are proud to welcome one of the most brilliant minds in global finance to our executive investment team." The room stirred. This partnership represents everything we stand for. Breaking barriers, embracing fresh perspectives, recognizing talent, regardless of background. He turned dramatically toward stage right. "Please join me in welcoming our newest partner, Darius Langston." Applause erupted. Darius walked forward calmly, confident, measured. His eyes scanned the audience. His steps were slow and certain. On stage, Griffin's smile was wide and polished. As Darius approached, he extended his hand toward Griffin, a universal gesture of respect. 1 second. 2. Griffin's eyes flicked to the outstretched hand, then shifted away. As if distracted, he turned to adjust the microphone. Darius's hand remained in the air for a moment, then fell. The applause faded. To the untrained eye, it might have looked like a missed cue, but to those watching closely, it was crystal clear. Griffin Stroud had refused to shake Darius's hand. A choice, a message. "You're only here because I let you be." Darius didn't flinch, no anger, no reaction. He simply stepped back and let Griffin continue. "Mr. Langston brings a wealth of knowledge," Griffin said smoothly, pretending nothing had happened. "His insights will shape our future on a global scale." Photographers clicked. Contracts were signed for show. Darius played the part, quiet and gracious, but behind his calm eyes, something had shifted. Meanwhile, one sharp-eyed reporter, seated in the 4th row, had caught everything. Her phone recorded the moment in crystal clarity. By the time the event ended, the clip was already circulating. By nightfall, it had been viewed millions of times. Across social media, the footage spread like wildfire. Slowed down, zoomed in, analyzed frame by frame. The hand, the pause, the turn, the cold dismissal. Some said it was a mistake. Others called it a microaggression. But many, especially those who knew how corporate power worked, knew exactly what it was. A warning shot. But what Griffin didn't know, what he never saw coming, was that this small act of arrogance was not the end of his dominance. It was the beginning of his fall. And Darius Langston, he wasn't here for applause. He was here to finish something that began 27 years ago. And today, with the world watching, he had just opened the first chapter. In a sleek downtown apartment overlooking the city, Naomi Clark paced silently before a wall of windows. Her phone buzzed constantly. Texts, emails, headlines, notifications from a dozen news alerts. The video had gone viral. Not just viral, explosive. Every frame of that silent rejection at the summit had been slowed, dissected, debated. Darius's outstretched hand, Griffin's calculated turn. The weight of centuries wrapped in a single moment of corporate arrogance. Naomi had brought Darius in. She had staked her reputation on this partnership. And now, the world was watching a PR crisis she could neither stop nor spin. Her phone rang. Walter. Caney. She answered without a word. Have you seen it? He barked, skipping greetings. Of course I've seen it, she replied, her voice flat. The whole world has. This is a nightmare. The board's in panic mode. We need Langston to issue a statement. Something calm. Something that shows unity. Can you reach him? Naomi hesitated. I've tried. She hadn't. She'd written 3 messages to Darius, deleted them all. We can fix this, Walter continued. Griffin will issue an apology tomorrow morning. We'll call it a misunderstanding. Will he? Naomi asked quietly. Will he really apologize? Walter's silence told her everything. That's what I thought, Walter snapped. Naomi, I brought you into that boardroom because you said you could handle this. You need to fix it. Before the Asian markets open. He hung up. Naomi stood still, the city blinking beneath her like static. She remembered 6 months ago, sitting in that very same boardroom pitching Griffin on bringing in Darius. He's difficult, Griffin had said. Doesn't play the game. He doesn't need to play games, Naomi had replied. His investment record speaks for itself. What she hadn't said was this. Darius Langston represented everything Stroud Dynamics claimed to value, but secretly feared. She turned back to her phone, a message, no name, just a single letter, D. It's time. Across the city, in a penthouse filled with shadows and silence, Darius Langston stood by a window. Behind him, a muted television looped the now infamous handshake clip. His own face stared back at him, calm, composed, unmoved. He turned away from the screen and walked to a desk. There, resting under soft lamplight, was a single manila folder. The label read, Project Phoenix, Contingency Protocol. He opened it. Inside were charts, records, surveillance, email logs, and years of intelligence. Blueprints of power, maps of corruption, Griffin's allies, Griffin's enemies, the names of people who had looked the other way, and those who had been quietly helping, the kind of information you only collect when you've been planning for decades. He poured himself a glass of water, no wine, no whiskey. He needed clarity, not comfort. His phone lit up again. Hundreds of messages, reporters, influencers, PR agents, podcast invites, talk shows. All wanted to help him leverage the moment. He ignored them. Instead, he opened his contacts, scrolled down, and pressed a single name. Victor. The call connected. It's time, Darius said. No explanation. No hesitation. Victor Reed, his closest advisor, simply replied, Understood. What about Griffin? Darius looked again at the television, now showing analysts debating the impact on Stroud's stock. Griffin Stroud, he said softly, just made the biggest mistake of his life. 27 years earlier, a courthouse, cold, grey and echoing. The judge tapped a pen slowly, rhythmically. 9-year-old Darius sat beside his grandmother Gloria, her hand tight around his. In the matter of Thomas Langston, this court finds the defendant guilty on all charges. His father, tall and proud, even in a prison uniform, turned to meet his son's eyes. No tears, no panic, just a look. One that said, "Be strong." The bailiff led him away. Gloria leaned down and whispered into Darius's ear, "Remember this day. Power is never given, it's taken." Back in the present, Darius sat alone in his quiet home. He held the same words in his heart, not out of bitterness, not for revenge, but for justice. Griffin hadn't just disrespected him, he had reminded the world, and Darius, how deep the rot still ran. And now, everything that had been quietly building, every document, every alliance, every whispered promise, was about to become fire. Because justice, real justice, doesn't whisper, it roars, and the roar had just begun. Inside a quiet office, dimly lit and sealed from the outside world, Victor Reed sat before a wall of monitors. Each screen showed a live feed, news channels, financial tickers, social media, trends. The handshake video was everywhere. Variations of the same headline rotated endlessly. Was it intentional? The snub that shocked Wall Street. Stroud's diversity message. Just for show. Victor leaned back, fingers steepled beneath his chin. Phase 1 had begun. He picked up his phone and made a series of calls. Calm, precise, no emotion. Push the influencers. Humanize Griffin. Emphasize stress, pressure, overwork. Tell our analysts to downplay the market reaction. Redirect attention. Highlight Stroud's clean energy work. Release those new charity numbers. It was a well-practiced routine, a smoke and mirrors operation designed to blur the truth. By noon, news anchors were debating whether Griffin's snub was simply a mistimed gesture. By evening, dozens of corporate influencers posted nearly identical messages. Let's not rush to judge. Griffin has always supported inclusion, but Victor wasn't fooled by their efforts. And more importantly, neither was Darius. At Stroud headquarters, Naomi Clark stepped off the elevator. Something felt different. The lobby guard, who always smiled and waved, barely looked at her. Instead, he checked her ID. Twice. The elevator, to the executive floor, which used to open automatically for her, now required a keycard swipe. She had to swipe it twice. By the time she reached her office, the message was clear. She was being frozen out. Her assistant, Jenny, looked up nervously. "Ms. Clark, they moved your 9:01 a.m. meeting." "What? The quarterly strategy session?" Jenny nodded. "To conference room 17. They didn't tell me until 5 minutes ago." Naomi's stomach dropped. "Who authorized that?" "Mr. Stroud's office." "Of course." Conference room 17 was small, under-equipped, and nowhere near the executive floor. It was a message. She arrived 2 minutes late. Every seat already taken by junior staffers who weren't usually invited. Griffin stood at the head of the table. "Naomi," he said, too cheerfully. "There you are. Sorry for the room change. Technical difficulties upstairs." He smiled. The projector in the boardroom wasn't broken. The only thing broken was trust. Naomi sat in silence as Griffin hijacked her presentation. The presentation she had spent weeks preparing. "We appreciate Naomi's efforts," he said smoothly. "But given recent developments, we'll be restructuring our approach." Naomi wasn't called on. Not once. After the meeting, as everyone filtered out, Griffin put a firm hand on her shoulder. "A word?" They stepped into a corner of the hallway. His voice dropped. "You're too emotional about this Langston situation," he said. "I need people who think with their heads, not their feelings." Naomi didn't flinch. "This isn't about emotions, it's about business. You publicly insulted a potential partner worth billions." Griffin's eyes narrowed. "What I did or didn't do is irrelevant. The point is, you brought him in. You vouched for him. So now you fix this." Her voice was steady. "Fix what?" "The fact that you couldn't bring yourself to shake his hand." Griffin stepped closer. "Watch yourself, Naomi. Your performance has been inconsistent lately. Some might question your commitment to this company's success." It wasn't a warning. It was a threat. Naomi gave no visible reaction, but inside her pulse thundered. She turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, confident, smug, and absolutely certain he still had control. He didn't. That night, as Naomi sat in her parked car outside her apartment, her phone buzzed. A message. No name, no photo, just 5 words. Meet me. Come alone. Below it, a time. A location. Lincoln Memorial. Tomorrow. 6 a.m. She stared at the screen, then closed her eyes and exhaled. Across the city, in a sleek apartment lit only by a desk lamp, Harper Stroud sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by papers. Her blonde hair was pulled into a messy bun. Her expression was serious, focused. As director of Stroud's sustainability division, a title her father had created for good PR, she had access to internal documents few others could see. What had started as a routine environmental review had led her into a web of inconsistencies, cover-ups, and broken promises. Initiatives announced with fanfare and then quietly shelved. Minority-led startups, acquired, then dismantled, community investments that never actually reached the communities. And now, the video. The snub. Harper had watched it a dozen times. She'd even argued with her father about it. It was an accident, he'd insisted. I didn't see his hand. I watched the video, Dad. Everyone watched it. It wasn't an accident. Her phone buzzed. A message. No name, no signature, just this. We need to talk. Tomorrow, Lincoln Memorial. Come alone. She read it 3 times. Some part of her already knew who sent it, and more importantly, why. The next morning, long before sunrise, 2 women would walk alone toward the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. They would meet a man who had planned this moment for years. Not for drama, not for headlines, but because the empire was cracking. And what came next would shake more than just a company. It would shake everything. The Lincoln Memorial stood silent in the pale morning light. A soft fog curled around its marble columns. The world had not yet fully woken. At 5:58 a.m., Naomi Clark walked up the steps alone. Her coat was zipped high, her breath visible in the cold air. She paused at the top, scanning the vast, empty monument. 2 figures waited there. One she expected. The other she didn't. Darius Langston, standing before the words etched into Lincoln's stone. Quiet. Still. Beside him, arms crossed tightly against the cold, stood Harper Stroud. Naomi blinked. I didn't realize this was a group meeting. Neither did I, Harper replied, her voice cautious, not hostile. Darius turned to them. He wasn't wearing a suit today, no tie, just a dark coat and jeans. Somehow, the simplicity made him look more powerful and more dangerous. Thank you for coming, he said. It's time we speak plainly. He gestured to the stone bench beside him. They sat. For a moment, no one spoke. The city yawned, in the distance, still half asleep. Then Darius began. The handshake was never the issue, he said softly. It was just a symptom. Naomi nodded slowly. A public crack in something rotten. Darius turned to Harper. Your father doesn't just run a broken company. He built it that way. Harper stiffened. You don't know what he's done. I know everything, Darius cut in gently. The fake green initiatives. The acquisitions of promising minority-led firms, gutted and shelved. The community outreach programs that never reached anyone. Harper looked away. Naomi leaned forward. How long have you been investigating him? A very long time, Darius replied. I know where the money goes. I know what the press never saw. I know what happened to the competitors who said no. His eyes found Harper again. I know what your father did to my family. The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Harper tried to speak but couldn't. She didn't need to. The look in her eyes, wide, overwhelmed, disoriented, said it all. Her father wasn't just flawed, he was dangerous, and she had unknowingly helped build the machine he used to crush people like Darius. What do you want from us? Naomi asked. Nothing you don't already want, Darius said. Truth, justice, change. Naomi straightened. Then I'm in. Harper didn't speak, but the slow nod she gave, the one that came with a tremble in her jaw, was enough. The alliance had formed. One from within the company, one from its bloodline, and one from the outside. The storm it never saw coming. Later that day, without press releases or corporate fanfare, a quiet financial earthquake struck Stroud Dynamics, Neurotech, the software firm that powered Stroud's global shipping and logistics system, was acquired by an anonymous investor. At first, the board brushed it off, just a routine transaction. By noon, the truth emerged. Darius Langston now owned 51% of Stroud's technological backbone. Every route, every order, every optimization platform they used, now ran through him. Inside his office, Griffin Stroud's phone rang non-stop. He stormed to the window, staring out over Manhattan, then turned to his trembling PR chief. "How the hell did this happen?" he shouted. Walter Caney wiped his forehead. "They approached Neurotech shareholders directly, quiet offers, premium prices. We didn't even know the company was on the table." Griffin's voice was rising. "Can we switch platforms? Pull out?" "Not without disrupting operations for months. Their system is fully embedded. It runs our entire logistics pipeline." Griffin turned red. "He's forcing my hand. He's doing this on purpose." Walter hesitated. "There's more." Griffin froze. "Go on." "The SEC has opened an audit into our carbon credit reports. Someone tipped them about discrepancies. Going back 5 years." Griffin stared at him. "Who signed those reports?" Walter swallowed hard. "You did. Every single one." The office fell silent, except for the distant sirens outside. Griffin's empire, built on image and intimidation, was cracking. And now, the cracks were growing. Because the man he had dismissed with a turn of the shoulder had just become the one man who could bring it all down. At the Lincoln Memorial that morning, Harper had asked Darius one question before they parted. "Why now?" His answer was simple. "Because justice is about timing. And Griffin just gave me the one thing I needed." He paused. An audience. The news broke quietly, almost like a rumor at first. Just a few financial blogs, a footnote on the morning ticker. But to those who understood power, it was a nuclear signal. The SEC had launched an official audit into Stroud Dynamics, specifically into its carbon credit reporting, the backbone of its billion-dollar sustainability claims. The report said it went back 5 years, but those inside the company knew it was much, much deeper than that. In his private office, Griffin Stroud stared at the flat screen on the wall. His reflection hovered faintly over a headline. "Federal audit targets Stroud's environmental records. Sources say massive fraud possible." Griffin's jaw tightened. He picked up the phone. "Get me Walter. Now." Meanwhile, in the heart of Stroud headquarters, a quiet purge was underway. It started with whispers, then unspoken warnings, then people vanished. Not in the literal sense, but in the way corporations erase problems. Emails bounced, access revoked, keycards stopped working. Naomi Clark's department was being sliced apart, ally by ally. First was Marcus Chen, a junior analyst, loyal, smart, always careful. He was pulled into a side room by security. When Naomi caught up, to them near the elevators, she demanded answers. "What's going on here?" "This doesn't concern you," the guard replied. "The hell it doesn't," she snapped. "He reports to me." Marcus looked at her, calm but sad. "It's okay, Naomi. Not your fault." Before she could respond, the doors closed. He was gone. Later, Naomi would find out what really happened. He wasn't terminated for misconduct. He was fired for eating lunch with her. Across town, in her apartment, Harper Stroud sat surrounded by files. She hadn't slept in 24 hours. The deeper she dug, the more she found. Documents buried in project folders, emails flagged for deletion, handwritten notes never meant to see daylight. A pattern. Startups run by people of color, bought, gutted, rebranded, environmental initiatives, faked for headlines, quietly killed. Community investments, announced with fanfare, then cancelled. Once press attention faded. Her father's legacy was built on lies. It wasn't just the business, it was personal. She opened a drawer and pulled out an old photo of her mother. Harper had been told she died in an accident when Harper was 2. But a new file told a different story. Her mother, Elizabeth, had founded a biotech company. Stroud had destroyed it, taken the patents, and erased her name from history. The accident? A suicide. Harper's hands shook as she stared at the image of the man she once called her hero. Who was this man really? In a dark corner booth of an upscale Manhattan lounge, Victor Reed sat across from Walter Kane. The room was quiet, carved out of shadows. Victor sipped still water. Calm, cold. Walter looked anxious, sweating under his collar. "What do you want, Reed?" he muttered. Victor's voice was even. "Just a reminder." He leaned forward. "We're not playing chess anymore, Walter. This is war." Walter forced a smirk. "Is that a threat?" "No," Victor replied. "It's a forecast." He stood to leave. "Oh, and tell Griffin," Victor added. "His Cayman accounts aren't as hidden as he thinks." Walter's face went pale. Victor left without another word. The leaks started slowly, like pinpricks in a dam. One news article, then two, then five. Anonymous sources, internal memos, screenshots of private emails. They flowed through the media like wildfire. Former employees spoke to reporters, ethics officers, junior analysts, even former board members. Whistleblowers revealed that Griffin had personally approved the shutdown of diversity programs, that environmental data had been manipulated to secure favorable press, that minority-led companies were required not to grow, but to eliminate competition. The truth was out, and the world was watching. Griffin Stroud did what he always did when cornered. He fought back. He called emergency meetings. He hired crisis managers. He ordered legal threats sent to reporters. He blamed disgruntled former employees and unverified information. On TV, friendly anchors still tried to defend him. Let's not forget all the innovations Stroud Dynamics has brought to the world. But their voices were losing power because something had shifted. The whispers had become roars. People weren't afraid anymore. Not of Griffin. Not of Stroud. The truth had momentum now, and nothing, not denial, not press releases, not intimidation, could stop what was coming. In a hotel suite, lit by nothing but the city's glow, Victor stood at the window, phone pressed to his ear. Darius's voice came through calmly. "Is it working?" Victor replied without hesitation. "It's not working." He paused. "It's unraveling. The press conference was supposed to be damage control." That's what Griffin Stroud told himself as he adjusted his silver cufflinks in the mirror. He practiced his smile, perfected his tone, chose every word with care. But none of it would matter, because by the time he stepped behind the podium, the world had already made up its mind. The ballroom had been hastily prepared. The same venue where, just weeks earlier, he had commanded the room with ease. Now, his audience wore skeptical faces, tight-lipped reporters, employees with forced smiles, cameras rolling from every angle. Griffin began confidently. "Stroud Dynamics is the target of a coordinated cyber attack," he declared. "Confidential documents have been stolen and manipulated to create a false narrative." His voice rang with forced outrage. He pointed at a reporter from a previously friendly outlet. "How do you respond to leaked emails showing you personally shut down minority-led initiatives after promising to support them?" she asked. Griffin blinked. "That's simply not true. These are fabrications," another reporter shouted. "And what about your involvement in the Thomas Langston case 27 years ago? The judge? The country club membership?" Griffin's composure cracked. "I have no idea what you're talking about," he snapped, eyes darting. The questions grew louder, more specific. "Did you order the destruction of Ellison Biotech? Are you hiding funds in the Cayman Islands? What about the SEC investigation? Is that false too?" His voice trembled. "This is a witch hunt, a vendetta." He ended the press conference early, storming off the stage as reporters shouted. Behind him, it was supposed to be his redemption. Instead, it became his unraveling, broadcast live across every major network. At the same moment, inside the now rebranded Langston Stroud building, another press conference was starting. No velvet curtain, no spotlight, just Naomi Clark, sitting calmly at a plain desk. Behind her, the Stroud logo still hung. But beside it now was a second emblem, the symbol of Langston Holdings. She looked straight into the camera. "To the board of directors, to every employee of Stroud Dynamics, and to the public," she began. What I'm about to share has been independently verified and submitted to the proper authorities. She took a breath, and then she laid it all out. The fake environmental reports, the destruction of minority-led companies, the culture of fear, the private targeting of whistleblowers. Her voice was steady, unapologetic. She showed emails, board memos, internal financial documents, footage, slide by slide, fact by fact. It was the kind of truth no denial could overcome, and she ended it with this. Griffin Stroud has not just betrayed investors, he has betrayed the very values this company pretended to stand for. The question before us now is simple. Will we continue to protect corruption, or will we finally choose justice? The livestream cut, and the company, and the world, would never be the same. That afternoon, the Stroud Board of Directors met in a private room overlooking Manhattan. For years, they had voted in lockstep. Today, their faces were pale, their voices hushed. The evidence was overwhelming. The SEC was moving fast. Shareholders were furious. Public trust had collapsed, and so, one by one, hands began to rise. The vote was nearly unanimous. Griffin Stroud was out, removed as CEO, removed from all leadership roles, stripped of voting power. The legacy that had taken decades to build collapsed in a single meeting. Meanwhile, in a quiet federal office, Victor Reed handed a sealed envelope to a senior SEC investigator. Inside was everything they needed. Evidence of offshore accounts hidden through shell companies, records of illegal campaign donations, proof of insider trading and stock manipulation, internal communications about dismantling ethical oversight teams. For 15 years, Victor had been watching, collecting, preparing. Now, the last puzzle piece had been placed. The investigator closed the envelope. "We'll take it from here," Victor nodded. "You'll want to move quickly. He still thinks he's untouchable." The next morning, it happened. Rain swept across the Upper East Side. News helicopters buzzed in the grey sky. In a long coat, hastily thrown over pajama bottoms, Griffin Stroud was led out of his townhouse in handcuffs. Federal agents flanked him. Reporters shouted his name. He didn't answer. He didn't look up. He was no longer the man who once walked across marble stages to thunderous applause. He was just another powerful man whose lies had finally caught up to him, and the world watched. From a quiet office across the city, Darius Langston stood at the window. The news played silently on the monitor behind him. Griffin's face, blurred by raindrops on the camera lens, filled the screen. Darius didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. This wasn't victory. It was balance. What was taken from his family all those years ago had not been erased, but it had been answered. Justice hadn't come through rage or revenge. It had come through truth, precision, and time. Darius turned off the television. There was more work to do. But for now, the storm had passed, and the fall of Griffin Stroud was complete. The world didn't stop when Griffin Stroud fell. Markets trembled, headlines flared, commentators talked endlessly. But the world kept turning, and somewhere beneath the noise, real change quietly began. The day after Griffin's arrest, the Stroud board met again. This time, not behind closed doors, but live-streamed. Transparency had a new seat at the table. The first order of business: leadership. After a brief solemn discussion, a unanimous vote passed. Naomi Clark was appointed interim CEO. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She accepted the position with quiet determination, not as a prize, but as a responsibility. That evening, she issued her first company-wide memo. "We are not who we said we were, but we can become who we were meant to be." Then came the reforms. One by one, she dismantled the walls Griffin had built. Transparency protocols. All major internal decisions would now be documented and accessible. Whistleblower protections, stronger than ever before, with full anonymity and third-party oversight. Diversity and inclusion programs, not performative, but integrated into hiring, leadership pipelines, and funding strategy. Community partnerships, restarted, rebuilt, run by the people they were meant to serve. No more false promises, no more quiet erasures. The rebuilding had begun. In a corner office, high above the city, Darius Langston sat across from Naomi. A formal offer rested on the table between them. CEO, Naomi said. You've earned it. But Darius shook his head. I didn't come here to wear the crown, he said. I came to break the system that kept people like me out of the room. Now that the walls are down, I'll stay at the edge of the fire, not at the center. She nodded. You'll be what then? A ghost? He smiled faintly. A mirror. And so, Darius Langston became strategic advisor to the board, with complete autonomy, unrestricted access, and a private office just 2 doors down from Naomi's. He would guide, he would warn, he would help rebuild, but he would never seek the spotlight. That wasn't his role. At the same time, in her father's now empty study, Harper Stroud sat at the same desk where Griffin once planned his empire. Stacks of documents surrounded her. She hadn't planned to dig deeper. She'd hoped the truth had already been uncovered, that the worst was over. But she had been wrong. At the bottom of an old file cabinet, tucked beneath forgotten press releases and luxury resort receipts, Harper found a folder marked Ellison, Final Disposition. She opened it. There were court filings, letters from attorneys, an old partnership contract, signed by her mother, Elizabeth Ellison, and Griffin Stroud. The company they started together had once promised to revolutionize cancer treatment. But then something changed. Griffin had filed for full control, claiming Elizabeth was mentally unstable. The board sided with him. Within a year, the company had been stripped, sold off, and erased. What the world remembered as a failed venture was in truth a theft. And Harper's mother, her legacy, had been destroyed by the very man who raised her. Harper's hands trembled as she read her mother's final journal entry. I hope Harper never sees me the way he does. I hope she grows up to see truth clearly, even if it breaks her heart. Tears filled Harper's eyes. She had spent her life protecting a name that had never protected her, and now she would redefine it. 1 week later, Harper walked into the boardroom alongside Naomi and Darius. She placed the folder on the table. This isn't about revenge, she said. It's about finally telling the truth. Naomi nodded. Darius simply said, You're ready. And with that, Harper officially joined the leadership team as Chief Impact Officer, a new role designed to ensure ethics, equity, and public good were no longer afterthoughts. They weren't cleaning up a brand. They were building a new one. 2 months later, in a ceremony live-streamed across the globe, the company unveiled its new name, Langston Stroud International. A name that honored the past, but didn't excuse it. That merged 2 legacies, one built in shadows and one born in fire. That name change wasn't just symbolic, it was a declaration. Naomi took the stage at the unveiling, standing before investors, activists, former whistleblowers, and a new generation of future leaders. Her voice was steady, her presence unshakable. We've made mistakes, we've caused harm, but we won't hide behind silence. This is no longer Griffin Stroud's company. This is our company, and every decision moving forward will reflect not just strategy, but humanity. Applause erupted. Behind her, Harper stood proudly. In the crowd, Victor watched quietly, arms crossed, protective, ever alert. And in the shadows near the back, Darius remained still. His work wasn't finished, but for the first time in a long time, he allowed himself a rare thought. Hope. Not the empty hope of headlines and slogans, but the kind that grows from truth, from pain, and from the courage to begin again. Langston Stroud International was not perfect, but it was real, and it was rising. The white peaks of the Swiss Alps stretched in every direction, cold and majestic. Inside the World Economic Forum at Davos, the warmth came not from the snow-covered rooftops or the polished wood interior of the Global Summit Hall, but from the weight of what was happening. At the center of a crowd of presidents, billionaires, visionaries, and heads of state, Darius Langston stepped onto the stage. There was no teleprompter, no script, just a microphone, and the world watching. He didn't begin with data. He began with a story. My father was sent to prison for a crime, He didn't commit. He worked in a factory owned by a man who would later become a giant in American business. That man shook hands in boardrooms and stepped on lives in alleys. And for most of my childhood, I watched the world applaud him. I'm not here for applause. I'm here to tell the truth. You could hear a pin drop. He paused, then continued, his voice calm, clear, impossible to ignore. Capitalism is not the enemy, but when it lacks conscience, when it is built on exclusion and deception, it does more than break systems. It breaks people. The next chapter of global business must begin with accountability. We cannot build towers out of silence. We cannot lead companies that only serve shareholders and ignore the very people who make their success possible. He glanced across the room, scanning the faces. Profit without purpose isn't power, it's poison. But I still believe we can change, and I believe we must. The applause didn't start right away. But when it didn't stop. Back home, Harper Stroud sat before a much smaller crowd. A university lecture hall packed with business students, journalists, and ethics scholars. The cameras were rolling here too. She looked different now. Stronger, grounded, not trying to be perfect, just honest. I grew up in the light of a powerful man, she said, and I chose to believe in his image, even when the truth was in front of me. For years, I worked inside a system that I now understand was built to protect power at the cost of people. I benefited from that system. She paused. This isn't an apology to restore my image. It's a commitment to never close my eyes again. Redemption isn't about being perfect. It's about doing the right thing, even when no one is watching. Her words were quoted everywhere. The New York Times called it the most courageous act of corporate honesty this decade. Forbes called her a blueprint for legacy transformation. But Harper wasn't chasing headlines. She was chasing healing for her mother's legacy, for the people hurt by her father's empire, and for herself. At Langston Stroud International Headquarters, the transformation continued. Naomi Clark, now permanent CEO, had become more than a leader. She had become a model, not for perfection, but for transparency, resilience, and moral courage. She held weekly town halls, where any employee could ask any question. She reinstated full medical benefits for fired whistleblowers. She launched a real-time accountability portal, where the company's diversity, hiring, and sustainability data could be viewed by anyone, at any time. Other companies began to notice, then copy, then admit they'd gotten it wrong too. One CEO wrote, "We modeled our latest policy overhaul on Langston Stroud's transparency model. It's not about keeping up. It's about catching up to the truth." But Naomi didn't celebrate. She just kept moving forward. Across dozens of cities, the first wave of Langston Opportunity projects began. Free after-school STEM programs, in underfunded districts, scholarships for first-generation college students, startup grants for minority entrepreneurs, rural tech centers offering coding boot camps to adults seeking a second chance. A school in Baltimore put it best. They gave us more than money. They gave us belief. One by one, communities that had been ignored were being empowered, not just with promises, but with tools. But behind the scenes, something else was unfolding, in the shadows. Far from press releases and handshakes, Victor Reed had begun moving, without Darius's knowledge. Not recklessly, but quietly. He visited former partners of Griffin Stroud, the ones who'd helped cover up corruption, the ones who'd stolen, silenced, and still sat comfortably at the tops of other companies. He sent them anonymous messages. "We know what you did. You're next." He leaked internal documents that had been untouched for years. Old contracts, fraudulent reports, severance agreements with NDAs attached, now exposed. None of it tied back to Langston Stroud International. All of it tied back to them. Victor wasn't seeking balance. He was seeking reckoning, and slowly, corporate giants began to wobble, one scandal at a time. Darius eventually found out. He sat across from Victor one evening in a quiet penthouse lounge. A storm rolled outside the windows. "Why didn't you tell me?" Darius asked. Victor didn't. "Blink, because you want change." He leaned forward. "I want consequences." They sat in silence. Two men, same mission, different methods. Neither one wrong, but no longer fully aligned. Back at Davos, as the conference ended and the world's leaders returned to their towers, Darius stood alone for a moment, outside, letting the snow fall on his coat. He looked up at the sky. He thought of his father, of his mother, of every silent injustice that had shaped his life. And then he turned and walked back inside. Because this fight wasn't over, and the truth, it never ends. The glow of Manhattan cast long shadows on the glass walls of Langston Stroud's executive floor. It was nearly midnight. Darius Langston sat alone in his office, staring at a printed report on his desk. His face was still, but his eyes, sharp, quiet, burning, told a different story. The report detailed a series of aggressive moves taken in the last 3 weeks. Leaked files, anonymous threats to former CEOs, whistleblowing packets sent to federal agencies, all traced back to a private, unregistered network operating under an old codename, Phoenix Holdings. Darius didn't need confirmation. He already knew who was behind it. An hour later, in a private suite overlooking the East River, Victor Reed opened his door to find Darius waiting. No security, no assistant, no preamble, just the two of them, the strategist and the visionary, the executioner and the architect. Victor gestured inside. "You came alone." "I came for answers." Darius walked past him, the city lights spilling in from the windows. He held up the file. "You leaked financial records of CEOs with no ties to Griffin. You fed stories to activist groups. You've been building an off-the-books system." Victor didn't deny it. Because they were part of it. Maybe not directly, but they knew. They looked away. They funded it. And they profited. Darius lowered the file slowly. "That's not justice, Victor. That's retribution." Victor's jaw tightened. "Justice? You think Griffin's arrest fixed the system? You think a rebranded logo and a few scholarships balance the scales?" He took a step forward. "You wanted reform. I wanted reckoning. You wanted to restore. I want to burn down the whole rotten tree." Darius shook his head. "I won't be part of this. You've crossed a line. And you know it." Victor's eyes burned. "It was always personal for me, Darius. I lost my family to men like him. I didn't come to change the world. I came to ruin theirs." For a long moment, silence hung in the room. Finally, Darius placed a single envelope on the table. "Phoenix Holdings is done," he said. "Effective immediately. All assets dissolved. All accounts closed. This ends now." Victor didn't move. Darius turned to leave, and just before the door shut behind him, he added, "You can choose to rise with us, or disappear in the smoke." The door clicked shut. Victor stood in the quiet, and for the first time in years, he didn't have a plan. The next day, Harper Stroud stood at the podium in the Langston Stroud Auditorium. Dozens of cameras pointed at her. Employees packed every row. She unfolded a single sheet of paper. "I was raised by a man who built a lie so large, the world called it success." Her voice was steady, her eyes clear. "I inherited his name, his wealth, his silence. And for too long, I protected that silence." She paused. "Today, I give it all back. Not to run from it, but to make it mean something better." She signed the bottom of the page, a formal public statement of accountability, notarized, legal, binding. She wasn't required to sign it. No court had ordered it, but integrity doesn't wait for subpoenas. It chooses the light. Meanwhile, a quiet ceremony was taking place across the country. No cameras, no speeches. Just a few friends, city officials, and one man walking slowly toward the steps of an old courthouse in Georgia. The same courthouse where Darius Langston's father had been sentenced decades earlier. The building had changed little over the years, still tall, still stone, still quiet. But today, something was different. Above the door, a new plaque had been installed, Thomas Langston Justice Center. Inside, the juvenile court would now provide free legal services to underprivileged families. A scholarship program had been named after Darius's mother, and a wing dedicated to wrongful convictions had just opened its doors. Darius stood before the building, the same place where his life had changed. And now, the same place where others would find protection, fairness, and hope. He looked up, closed his eyes, and let the silence speak. Later that evening, Naomi Clark, Harper Stroud, and Darius gathered in the new boardroom. No titles, no agenda, just three people who had once stood on opposite sides, now united by something stronger than business truth. Harper smiled faintly. You think we'll ever stop rebuilding? Naomi shook her head. We're not supposed to. That's how you keep it honest. Darius leaned back. There's no finish line for justice, he said quietly. Only a path. Outside, the skyline of the city shimmered like a promise. Langston Stroud International had become more than a company. It had become a movement, one that didn't start with power, but with pain. Not with money, but with memory. And now, in every office, every policy, every scholarship and school they touched, justice stood tall. Not perfect, not complete, but real. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough.